Alright, so I've got this piece of clay centered, and I'm going to work on trying to throw a knob and all, or a closed form with a lid. So here, this piece here, like I said, centered, kind of a little wider than it is tall. I'm going to get it maybe just a bit narrower than this. The width that I've got here is the width that my basic shape is going to be formed on, so it won't get a lot wider, it won't get a lot narrower, but it will close up at the top. So now I'm going to drill my hole in the inside here, add some water so I don't stick, lean my body over so I'm compressing that clay. Open out my floor. I want a nice flat floor on this guy. And then I am not going to thin it out too much at the top here, but I've got this wide enough that I should be able to get a rib in the inside. So I'm going to take my wooden rib, compress my floor, maybe get into that corner a little bit. And then, like I would do if I were throwing a narrow neck cylinder, collaring a cylinder, I'm going to take care of this bottom section of the clay first. I'm going to thin out this bottom area, ease into the top, and I'm not going to thin this section at the very top out quite yet. Now I'm ready to start moving into the middle section of my clay, and I'm going to use more pressure on my outside finger than on my inside finger. Notice I'm still not getting into that top section. So I've got a thinned out piece here, a thinned out piece here. It gradually transitions to thicker, quite a bit thicker here. Now I'm going to collar this section here. I'm going to get both hands nice and wet, and I'm going to very gently squeeze this clay. And I'm using the whole of my fingers or my hands kind of shaped around this. Collaring is that process of wrinkling up the clay. So anytime you collar this clay, you need to come back and do another pull. And I'm going to have a combination of collars and pulls on this particular piece. I had some water on the inside that I got out of there. Now I no longer can reach the bottom of this particular form without a tool. I could get in there with a throwing tool, a longer throwing tool, but my basic shaping is done at this point. Or my basic thinning out is done at this point. I can do some shaping with a rib later on. Now, I stretched that out a little bit so I could reach the bottom, but I'm going to come back here and do some collaring, get myself back to where I can't and shouldn't be dealing with that section. The bottom should be already shaped how I want it to be shaped. So I'm doing some collaring. You notice that the wrinkling and the folding of the clay has caused an unevenness in the top. That's pretty typical. Your hands aren't a perfect circle, and so as you squeeze and collar that clay, you don't get a perfectly even fold happening there. Now, some of this down here, the clay's perfectly fine, but it's a little lumpy looking, a little funny looking. So I'm going to grab a rib if I can find one. There it is. And I'm going to just clean up some of the water on the outside so this part of the clay stops absorbing the water, the slip, stops absorbing that moisture, makes it a little bit stronger. I'm also going to mess with the shape a little bit. I'm just compressing this edge. I didn't want it to belly out quite that much. So I've cleaned that up a little bit. Now this clay is going to be just a little bit stronger as I continue to work up here. So a pull and a collar. And I'm eventually going to cut some of this clay off of the top. If it's real distracting, you can do it sooner. If it's not real distracting, you can wait a little bit until you do it. Now, as this starts to get narrower, this extra clay at the top may cause it to kind of fold in on itself. So obviously you want to take it off of there before you get to that point. Now I should start thinking about my shape here. I'm trying to make a knob and all, which is a lid, a form where the lid is thrown on the piece, and I've actually got way too much clay. I kind of narrowed this down sooner than I needed to. But one of the things people have a tendency to forget about is they don't leave quite enough clay. Most people kind of get to the top and barely close this up. I want to make sure that I'm closing this up with extra clay at the top, and that extra clay at the top, as you see here, is the knob. And by knob I mean the thing you can grab onto. You make a closed form like this that ends right about there, and you're not going to be able to pick up the lid as easily. This piece here, that knob at the top, allows me to pick up the lid. So I can come back in with my rib. Mine's kind of a weird shaped guy here for whatever reason. Now I have a balloon of air trapped in there, right? As I push on this outside, this clay is going to swell somewhere else. If I push up here, the clay is going to swell down below. And that's just the fact that I've got clay wrapped around air. The air is not going to get smaller, and so as I mess with this outside, I have a little bit more room to mess with it, to make changes and things like that. So there's a couple ways you can work with a knob and all, and one of those is that I can be done right now. I can clean up the bottom, take it off, and later on when it's leather hard, I'll take a knife and at a bit of an angle, I'll cut off this top. And I say at a bit of an angle, I want to come down with my knife, my fettling knife or paring knife. I want to come down at an angle like this, and that means that the cut I've made will sit down into there rather than sitting right on the top. If I come straight across, this lid won't have anything to hold it in, and so as you carry this pot, you tip it and the lid slides right off. But on this particular piece, I'm going to do it a slightly different way. I'm going to flatten this up and try to get this at a right angle. You know, using this rib, I don't have a right angle. I have a flat edge and a rounded edge. If I grab something like my blue rib here, I can actually set this down here without this extra clay here, and I can get that right angle. So I'm going to cut away a little bit. I'm going to do my undercut essentially early so I can get rid of that extra clay down there. And this will allow me to check my angle. As long as I get this straight up and down, I'll be making a right angle there. And the reason for making the right angle is I'm going to create a gallery in here. And that gallery that I'm going to create in here is going to allow me to have this, this piece come off, make the gallery, make the piece that sits inside of here all kind of in one. Now to do this, I'm going to push some of this clay in, and if I'm going to push some of this clay in, I don't want that balloon effect happening. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop a hole up here. Now I no longer have a balloon, but it's deflating, right? So if I push at the side, it's going to come loose a little bit. So I'm missing my tool. All right, so my tool that I'm going to use here has just a flat edge. So this is any kind of stick that has basically a flat edge. This one's a little rounded because I left my other tool at home, but we'll work with this. So I'm going to make this gallery by pushing some of this clay straight in like that. And now you can kind of see what's going to happen here. It's gotten a little bit thicker up here. I'll have to trim that later on. But this inset here, as long as I've got it deep enough inside the clay, inside the wall of this piece, oops, it's going to drop down. When I cut it through, it's going to drop down, and that's going to hold that piece in place. Now, I am going to trim a little bit of this away later. I may have to clean up a little bit of this, and I'm going to clean that edge. I'm not going to cut it right now because it's pretty sticky and it may stick back together, but later on, once this is ready, I'm going to come in with my needle tool right about here, and I'm going to cut all the way through that wall. At this point, this piece is done for now. It needs some trimming work, but it's as much as I can do right now. I'm going to run a wire through so that bottom doesn't crack, or so that bottom is less likely to crack. And now, because it's on the bat, I can just pop the bat right off of here. Possibly. There we go.